Okay, so here we are again. We talked before about the philosophy of mind or some theories of mind. I gave you an overview of some of the important theories of mind. And now we're going to talk a little more about the details of these theories and some of these theories and their relevance to AI. Okay? So first, mental states. You remember the whole question of the philosophy of mind is, what is the true nature of mental states? What are mental states? What is the mind? And mental states are things like pain, anger, thinking, beliefs, calculating, hope, visual perception, seeing, a red thing like my t-shirt, qualia. Now, qualia, this we will talk about in a moment in more detail. Qualia are the subjective feelings that we have when we have a sensory impression. So, for example, you see something red, and this red feels to you in a particular way from the inside. When you see my t-shirt now, you have a particular way of how red feels to you. And this is the qualia, is the subjective impression, the subjective feeling of consciousness, of your own consciousness, or of a sensory perception, right? You can apply it to both. Okay, this is a very important point, this qualia thing. You will see in a moment why this is important for the philosophy of mind, because it's something subjective. It's something that makes you realize that you are consciously perceiving something, and it's a difference perhaps from what a camera does. Your eye sees my t-shirt, a camera sees my t-shirt also. The camera that I'm looking at right now also sees this t-shirt, but you have a subjective impression of what it feels like, while the camera doesn't have that. And this seems to be a very specific thing that perhaps only humans have, perhaps only organisms with developed brain have, perhaps all living things have. It's impossible to say, but it is something that clearly distinguishes us from a camera, which does not have a subjective feeling of seeing anything. So qualia is about how it feels to see red, how it feels to taste chocolate, and this we will see in a moment becomes important in the context of some arguments later. So first, dualism, mind is different from body. So this is the main thesis of dualism. The mind is different from the body. These are two things. And if you are a substance dualist, you say a mind substance is different from a body substance. So you have really two substances. And this is what Christians say. When you die, for example, then your body is obsolete, destroyed. And your soul leaves the body, and your soul goes somewhere where it exists independently of the body. Your soul couldn't do that if it was not independent of the body, if it didn't have a substance of its own. Or when you are born, when an embryo is created, out of the cells that the mother's egg that is fertilized and so on, then you create an embryo. The embryo originally doesn't have a soul in it. It's just a piece of cell. But then at some point, the soul goes into it, according to the Christian belief, and then it becomes a full human. Historically, this has changed, at what point the soul enters the body of the embryo, of the baby. But this is the idea, right? And then without a soul, if a soul didn't go into the baby wouldn't be a human. It would not have a mind. It would not work. It would be lifeless. It would be just, an organ, but not a human being. Okay, so this is substance dualism. Now, substance dualism has some problems. Can you think for a moment what is problematic about that? Stop the video perhaps, think about it, and then come back and we talk more. Now, the most obvious problem with substance dualism is the observation that damaging the brain leads to a loss of cognitive abilities. And the question is why? If I'm a substance dualist, I don't have an explanation why damaging my brain would damage my mind, because if my soul is separate and my mental substance is separate from my body substance, damaging the brain should not damage the mind, because the mind is immaterial. If I can have a soul that goes to God and perceives afterlife, even after my body is completely destroyed and gone and eaten by the worms, then why does hammering on my brain with a hammer once or twice already makes me unconscious? And my soul is not able to do anything about that, right? This is implausible. This is a big problem. So another problem is the other way around. How can an immaterial cause like the mind have a material effect if the material world is causally closed? So this needs a little explanation. We generally think that the material world is causally closed. This means that every effect in the material world must have a material cause. Now, I can take this box of peanuts here and shake it. You hear a sound. You hear something in there. Now you can try to make all kinds of causal chains. First, this thing here is blue. Why is it blue? What is the cause for it to be blue? What made it blue? Well, somebody applying the blue paint to it. I can go back, I can go to the factory that makes them, and I can see somebody there, a machine, painting this thing blue. At some point it must have been painted blue. So I have the physical effect of this being blue, and I can trace it back to the moment where somebody painted this thing blue. Now, this thing shakes. Why does it shake? It shakes because my arm shakes it, my hand shakes it. The reason for its shaking can be immediately perceived. It's also a physical reason. My hand is the reason for the shaking of this thing. Well, I can hear the sound. Why do I hear something moving in there? Because if I open it, I can, see there is a peanut, and this peanut is what is shaking in there. Now it's not shaking anymore. So this is the reason why it shakes and why it makes this noise. So the reason for the noise is a physical reason. It's the peanut, which now does not exist anymore. Well, it does in a different form. So, and this is true of every effect in the world. Every effect in the world can be traced back to a physical cause, and we believe this. This is the reason why when the police, find a body lying on the floor, they don't go, oh yeah, spontaneously, a ghost killed him or something, or he self-killed, the body just stopped working. This is not how it works. The police will go and try to find out what is the reason that his body is now lying lifeless on the floor. And there must be a physical reason. We believe this. There must be a murderer, there must be a weapon, there must be a wound, some kind of damage to the body. If there is no damage to the body, then perhaps he has not been killed, perhaps he died, but then I must be able to find why he died. So I can cut open the heart, I can cut open, all kinds of other things, make a post-mortem examination of this body, and I find out, okay, the reason for the death was he drowned, he had a stroke, he had a, a heart attack, and so on, and I can identify these things. And I can also identify reasons for those things. He had a stroke because, he was smoking too much. So we believe that there is this chain of causes. And if there wasn't this chain of causes, then we would have magic in the world, right? Then it would be, things would happen for no reason. Suddenly this pencil starts flying around for no reason. Nobody's holding it. But this doesn't happen. We don't believe that this happens. Most people don't believe that this happens, let's say. It doesn't happen. Why doesn't it happen? When this pencil flies, there is a physical reason why it flies. My hand is holding it. It might fly without my hand for another physical reason. I might have a strong air blowing fan under here that is able to blow so strongly the air that the pencil is floating in the air. current. This is another possibility, right? But it's also physical. A pencil, for no physical reason, would not start flying through the countryside. So therefore, we believe strongly in our everyday lives that the world is causally closed. Every physical effect has a physical cause. But now if I'm dualist, I suddenly destroy this. I say there is one case, one single case in the whole universe where a physical effect does not have a physical cause. And this one case are mental states and the effects of mental states. Now I say, I want to lift my hand. I lift my hand. What is the reason for the lifting of the hand? Where is the cause for this effect of the lifting of the hand? The cause is my mental state that I want to lift the hand. So now I have an immaterial cause for a material effect. This is very strange. It's the only time. It's magic. I would say my hand lifted without a physical cause. It lifted because of an immaterial cause. Crazy, right? And then you have to ask, how does this work? How did this immaterial cause lift my hand? Because in order for me to lift my hand, I need, to activate these muscles. I activate them means I send them signals, electric signals. Okay, so far is good. Where do electric signals come from? They come from the brain. Okay, but now, how does the brain create the electric signals? If you're a dualist, you would say the mind creates them. So again, something immaterial suddenly creates electric signals. The electric signals spark out of nothing. This is not really plausible in our view of science. If this was the case, if thoughts could spark electric signals, I could use them for the generation of electricity. I could just think, and with my thinking ability I could create electricity, which I could collect in a battery and then drive my car or something by the electricity that I create with my thoughts. This would, for example, then destroy the idea of the conservation of energy. It would destroy all sorts of physical laws that we believe hold, right? Conservation of energy, because now the thought is creating energy out of nothing. So this seems to be very problematic. This would mean, if this was possible, if dualism was true in this way, substance dualism, it would mean that something is very wrong about physics, and that thoughts can create momentum and energy out of nothing, and they can influence things to behave, to arms to move, and mouths to say words like I'm doing now, for no physical reason. And essentially we would say that the way the brain works is magic, is based on magic, on the magical principle that something that does not physically exist has an effect on the physical world. So generally we don't want to accept this, right? It's not a good thing for our understanding of physics. It would mean that we have to completely change our physics. Now, another thing, another theory would be Epiphenomenalism. Epiphenomenalism, epi in Greek means on top of. On top of. Phenomenon is something I can see. Epiphenomenalism means there is something on top of what I can see, and this is the mind. So the idea here is that we still have a dualist theory. We have body and we have mind, but the body can have causal effects on the mind, but the mind cannot have causal effects on the body. This is the idea here. So it's a one-way street. The body affects the mind, but the mind has no influence on the body, right? You have to imagine this like it's difficult to, because in reality we don't have one way only influences, but you could kind of imagine that let's say you have you are in a situation at the airport, right? Passport control, and you have this man there that checks the passports, and he is enclosed in his little booth, and he cannot come out. He does not come out. He is behind bulletproof glass there, so you cannot touch him, you cannot attack him, you cannot move him. He's sitting there totally isolated behind his glass, and he is only, imagine there's also no hole in front of him where the passport goes. This doesn't exist there, so you only have a microphone. He has a microphone, and there's a speaker, and he can speak to you and tell you what to do. So he can say, security check here, please put your passport on the scanner outside. Or he can say, please put your finger, your thumb on the fingerprint scanner. And if you don't do it, he can say again, put your finger there now, or, we will arrest you. So this is a one-way influence. This man can make you do things. He can make you put your passport here and there, and put your finger here and there, and lift your arms. And if he said, jump on one foot, because otherwise we will arrest you, you will probably do it. So he can control you. But it's only one way. You cannot control him. Right? And in this way, the epiphenomenalist believes that the man in the booth is your brain. Your mental states, your thoughts, are you outside of this booth. And so the brain can create thoughts, but these thoughts are just epiphenomena. They are just things that you perceive, and phenomena that you see or you perceive them, but they're just on top of the brain, and they're created by the brain, and the thoughts themselves have no influence on the brain. So this has some advantages. It's very tempting philosophically to believe this, and you can see why. Because the body now in this theory can have causal effects on the mind, and this theory therefore explains why brain damage can damage our thoughts, right? Brain damage leads to impaired cognitive abilities because the cognitive abilities are created by the brain. So if I damage the brain cannot create the cognition anymore. Also, since the mind cannot affect the body, this theory doesn't need to explain how an immaterial cause could affect the material world. So all the magic of dualism is gone now, of the previous version of dualism. This is also dualism, but a restricted version. Because the big problem with magic was that the thoughts could, suddenly influence material things. Non-physical, non-material causes could suddenly be causes for material effects. But this is not the case here, because the thoughts are created as a secondary phenomenon, and they themselves don't have any effect on the body. So this is, philosophically, this shows you the difference between philosophy and common sense, right? It's very obvious in epiphenomenalism, because philosophically it's such a tempting theory that solves all the theoretical problems. But from a common sense perspective, it's totally nuts, right? Nothing about that has any sensible relation, to how we perceive our body. And this is the problem, right? From a philosophical, argumentative perspective, it's a fine theory that solves the immediate problems of dualism while still being a dualist theory. But from the perspective of common sense, it's not satisfactory at all. Because why would we have a mind that has no effect on our actions? This is the first thing, right? Biology is and evolution are very economical, right? Over the course of natural evolution, organisms tend to optimize their behavior. They tend to optimize their facilities to produce the required behaviors for survival in the most efficient way possible, to waste as little energy and effort as possible. And suddenly now you say that we, as the end product of all this evolution, have all this mind, all these things going in our mind, imagination, thought, logic, creativity, art, movies, stories, novels, empathy, psychological states, happiness, unhappiness, depression, and all this mental world in our minds is totally and utterly useless and has no effect at all, right? This is crazy. This would completely contradict what we know of biology. We have created, our biology has created our brains, evolution has created our brains. We can see previous stages of our brains in monkeys. We can see earlier stages of our brains in other mammals, dogs and cats. We can see neurons in almost everything that is alive, in all animals, surely, right? We can see neurons in the smallest kind of worms or insects. And we can see there's a whole chain of these things developing from the smallest animals to us. We can see how neurons work everywhere. And only we now should have, or perhaps dogs also have, or cats also have, we don't know, these mental worlds. But these mental worlds don't mean absolutely anything. So then why do we have them, right? It doesn't make any sense. Also, introspection disagrees. Introspection means how I perceive myself from the inside. I look in myself and try to conclude something from how I feel myself from the inside. Now, introspection, looking into myself, disagrees. We think that our beliefs, intentions, and so on do affect our actions. Clearly, my wish to have a sip of coffee is what causes me now to pick this up. Epiphenomenalism gets this totally wrong. Epiphenomenalism says, it's not that I wanted to drink this that made me lift it. It is that I lifted it first, I drank it, and then somehow my brain reconstructed this wish to want this, and later it got the satisfaction of the fulfillment of the wish. But all these things happened actually without any effect on my action. My action was totally biologically pre-programmed. I saw this, my body perceived some lack of, sugars, and said, I want to drink this, and not a mental state, but the body said, now we have to move the muscles to drink this. And all this wanting a coffee and so on, and being satisfied because of the coffee, all this enjoying the coffee is just a cloud of mental garbage that accompanies the action but doesn't influence it. This, again, seems to completely contradict our perception of ourselves. We think that our mind does something. Our mind does make decisions, and then we follow up on those decisions, and we make our body act in the way that the mind has planned in advance. It's not that the mind does that the body does everything independently of the mind. The mind just then produces some fitting imaginations, right?